Hi, this is Anthony Upchurch. We're doing case study number 1. It's the unmotivated student for EDCI 521. Um, so what I'm going to do is go ahead, we're going to do a review of the story, and then we're going to look at some of the most evident problems that we see. We're then going to look at a theory, or at least an approach that can guide us to find a few solutions, to see what maybe these characters could have done better to kind of create a more healthy classroom environment. Our characters at hand are Marcia Thomas, who is the student teacher, Miss Egan, who is the mentor teacher, the university professor, who is guiding Marcia Thomas's student teaching, and then we've got Jody, who is our unmotivated student at hand, and her classmates. So what's going on is a few days prior, Marcia Thomas had set up a lab activity. She's now reviewing the lab reports. She is sitting at her desk with 6 or 7 other students lined up to kind of get feedback for their assignments. She can't really see what's going on in the classroom, but having assigned the class a chapter reading with a few questions, she feels pretty confident that despite not being able to see her students, they will be so engaged in this activity that she should not need to monitor their behavior too much. That said, there is Jody, and Jody has not done her lab report, and has not so much interest in this assignment either. We see that she is hanging out at Nina's desk, chatting with her. She, of course, gets chastised, told to go back to her seat. She occupies herself again by chatting with a friend, Aaron, after again being chastised. We see that she goes up to a solar system poster, kind of traces the planets around, occupies her mind that way, and then is told to go out into the hall and do her work there, in the hopes probably of eliminating distractions. Jody does not take heed and instead goes to a digestive tract model and kind of interests herself in how food would be digested. What does it say? She pantomimes eating a piece of food, digesting it in the plastic stomach, and moving it through the intestines. This, of course, is entertainment for other students, and Marcia, the student teacher, finally shouts at her to go into the hall, which she does, but then, of course, starts making silly faces and kind of entertaining her peers that way. At the end of the class, there is as much evidence to her interest in this chapter activity as there was in the lab activity. She has not completed it. So end of the day comes, and the university supervisor, the professor who's kind of guiding Marcia Thomas in this student teaching, meets with both teachers to kind of talk about the lesson. So at that point, pardon me. At that point, Jody comes up, and Miss Egan remarks that Jody has been rather problematic all year, and that she has a learning disability. She's reading on a 2nd grade level despite being in 9th grade. Normally she has an aide with her, but there is no aide today. And Marcia adds that she has not been able to keep her on task all year. And then it says that she just doesn't want to do anything, which that's a pretty hefty accusation, I believe. Miss Egan supports Marcia's findings with she has not been a very motivated student, and then says there's not a lot that they can do with her. Now, clearly, this is a highly problematic scenario. There are a lot of misdeeds going on, if you will. Um, so we're going to go through a few of the issues at hand here. Um, and I tried to break them up in theme and not just do a run through, like a bullet pointed run through, if you will, of the individual flaws. For one, chapter 2 of our textbook, Classroom Management, will say that relationships are extremely important in proper classroom management. So we see that she separated herself off from her students, and that shows a low degree of influence. So whereas you would want a high degree of, like, you'd want to be influential in your classroom, this shows that having herself cut off from her students, being at her desk, not being readily available to either provide feedback or answer questions, shows that she's not taking influence as such a high priority. The mentor teacher is kind of training the student teacher to have also a low affect. And if you have low affect and low influence, then you're going to have a very ineffective classroom, for the simple fact that not only do you not matter, but you are not supportive. So you're really just kind of removing yourself from the equation altogether almost. So back to the low affect, Miss Egan states that Jody's been a problem all year, and she has a learning disability. This is kind of modeling a poor response for the mentor teacher. She just doesn't want to do anything, and it is Marcia who says that. Where Miss Egan is modeling kind of what they call victim blaming, I would imagine. You've got Marcia who's kind of picking up on that and being like, yeah, it's her, it's not us. So despite being a naturally high affect, she trusted that the students would want to do the activity. She came to the table with low influence, but I do believe that Ms. Egan is modeling low affect that, while may not have been Marcia Thomas's kind of default position, she's picking up, she's learning that. You have a poor setup, and that was talked about in our classroom management book also. She, again, can't see the students. Not only does it show that she necessarily doesn't want to be so super engaged with them, but it's logistically wrong too. What teacher whose job it is to guide learning would bar herself from those who are learning? In the book, it says that the desk location needs to be functional. If the desk is used during instruction, it needs to be in a location that allows you to monitor your students. She maybe could have set her desk up or set traffic up to be able to see the students. I mean, if she was just bent on using that desk, she maybe should have placed it in a more central location, maybe not had the students line up to block her view. Or really honestly, what she could have done is, while they're working at their desk, she could have been walking up to them with the papers and kind of giving them feedback there, or finding maybe a quieter location if she didn't want to have that conversation, kind of what amounts to in public. So also, her being mobile would allow her to practice what's known as proximity. It's exactly what it sounds like, being close to your students, kind of giving them the idea that you're there, you're watching, if you will, and that you're available, which would increase her influence. To kind of add to that naturally occurring affect, I think that the more influence she would give herself, the more that natural affect would kind of come out. Okay, so The another side issue, and it doesn't discuss this in the story, but I can't help but wonder if she effectively modeled how to complete the assignment. I understand that reading a chapter and filling out a few questions is pretty straightforward, but I can't help but wonder if maybe increased instruction would have added a little extra buy-in. I mean, and it not have just been kind of a throwaway assignment. The main issue that I see, and the approach doesn't attack this directly, but the main issue that I'm seeing here is a sort of laziness. They are, you don't see Miss Egan get up from her desk. You don't see any of the two teachers holding themselves accountable. The fact that Jody has a learning disability almost makes her a throwaway student. We've done everything we can. They haven't, but they've done everything they could easily think of. And they are. They're shifting the responsibility of learning away from themselves as the adults and the teachers onto this struggling adolescent. So what I see is a bit of laziness, and in the approach, like I said, that doesn't necessarily attack this laziness, but that would help them and does maybe require a little bit more work or creativity than these teachers were showing that they wanted to put in for this day, is a approach called Win-Win Discipline by sponsored or kind of come up with by Spencer Kagan. Here we see Jody seems internally motivated and guided by impulse. This model seeks to work with students to solve problems. This, in contrast, of course, to Marcia, who seems to be operating on a because I said so basis. But really, I can't help but wonder if that's being modeled after Miss Egan. Again, I don't know how made up the story is, but this is a snippet. We don't know what the rest of the class looks like on any other day. But as trusting as she is, I can't see her being this hands-off and being authoritarian. I would imagine the sort of hands-off approach would be that of a very trusting person. So students' needs interact with discipline to create 1 out of 3 outcomes. What is meant by that is students' needs affect classroom management in 1 out of 3 ways. Either a student doesn't have any problems and it doesn't affect discipline. They're doing what they want to be doing. They're happy doing it, whatever. Or a student's needs, let's say, are not met. These, by needs, Kagan refers to these needs as positions, and there's 7 positions that we'll get to here in a second. But these positions will affect discipline in that either the students' positions are aligned with the environment and there's no problem. These students' positions are not aligned with their environment. There's a bit of a rupture there. But the student possesses the skills to not make it a problem. Or, again, there's that misalignment between position and environment, and the student lacking appropriate skills is unable to self-manage. Please do pardon me while I grab a charger. Pardon. Okay, Thank you. The last thing I wanted to do was pause the video, and then suddenly need to learn how to video edit. So, there we go. Pardon. Okay. Okay, so, again, pardon me for that. Okay, so we were talking about how these positions interact with discipline. These 7 positions that will create the sorts of needs that will challenge students' ability to self-manage. Students' needs are attention-seeking, avoiding embarrassment, anger venting, control-seeking, energetic, bored, and uninformed. So, there we go. Okay. So, here we see with Jody, who just wants to talk. She's reading at a 2nd grade level, in 9th grade. So she's 7. The difference in her ability is really the difference between starting school and being in 7th grade. So we see that there's a lot going on with her. I would postulate that she does seek attention, given that she speaks with Nina and Aaron. She does want to avoid embarrassment because she probably doesn't want to be doing this reading assignment and not understand it. I don't see a lot of anger venting with her, though I do see that she is energetic and bored. And again, I'll go back to the fact that the assignment was very straightforward, but maybe had it been properly modeled, it may have given her kind of a secure environment to be increasing those reading skills, which she does clearly need to do. So, to kind of cap up the immediate problems as seen through Kagan's view, we see that the teacher has not taken into account the student's positions, the student's needs, and that is creating a situation where the disconnect has become a larger issue than Jody's self-management skills can allow for. The 3 pillars of win-win discipline, now that we've established that there's a problem that needs this discipline. First, you want to let the student know that you're on the same side, okay? Clearly, saying about a student that she's unmotivated and kind of a throwaway, if it doesn't create an outrightly antagonistic situation, it does nothing to create a cooperative one. So what she needs to do is help Jody realize that their goals are the same, and even if they're not the same, they need to get on the same page. They need to communicate what's going on, and then try to not to overuse the word align, but they need to align their goals and approaches. The shared response. Okay, so after you realize that you're on the same side, the next thing you do is shared responsibility. So it follows kind of a guided release. It follows a sort of I do, we do, you do. I'm on your side. I need you on mine. What can we do to get you to be a contributing member of this classroom? And after you have set goals and expectations, you have outlined the consequences. And Kagan's view is to make this very student-centered, or student-driven. So Jody would be the one who would come up with the action plan. Jody would be a key participant in establishing this joint mutual contract. It's not just Miss Kagan saying, or I'm sorry, not Miss Kagan, it's not just Miss Thomas saying, I need you to do this, sign here. It's, hey Jody, what is going on? Are you wanting to And it's not even are you wanting to, it's tell me what you want, tell me what's going on. Now that we know what's going on, um, what do you think we can do to solve it? After you've empowered the student enough, after Miss Thomas would have empowered Jody enough, through enough time, I mean, it's not going to happen like the next day. The next step is learned responsibility. She independently manages herself, and she feels empowered enough to be able to do so. Um, so again, to just kind of review, the process when there is a disruption is identifying the behavior, identifying the position, um, and then of course finding a solution and following up is the big key. That way it's not just like, okay, we've done it, I'm in the clear. um, that way you follow up and you let the student know though that you you care enough about them that you're actually on, like, you're not just looking for a quick fix. It's not just like a scratch that you put a band-aid on so that you could go on with the rest of your day. The student really matters. It's not something that you want to go on with the rest of your day despite. It's a real thing that matters to you. Um, so along with this assignment, I'm going to send 2 images that show how cooperative learning not only helps isolated discipline problems, but also helps achievement gaps. So disengagement is actually seen. It's not, achievement gaps and discipline aren't 2 discrete problems, but are rather a shared symptom of a disengaged classroom. That cooperative learning, of course, will provide the engagement, especially for a student like Jody, who really likes to chit chat, um, who may benefit from learning techniques outside of just passive reading, especially given her current low level, which hopefully the aid is helping her get through. Um, so some engaging activities, of course, would be think, pair, shares. That's kind of, that's what I would use for this activity. Not necessarily the share part. The think, pair, write. I would write it in a journal, and that way you can revisit it, and it's not just like we read chapter 7 because there was nothing else to do. So again, if we're going to apply this model to what could have happened, first off, Marsha Thomas would not be at her desk. Marsha Thomas would be walking around the classroom, engaging with the students. The students would not be on their own reading this chapter, but would rather be cooperating with their peers to make sense of it. Jody does not just have a. I mean, I'm sure she, like, I'm not a doctor, nor do I know this fictional character, but Jody's learning disability and lack of motivation, seen through Kagan's approach, is really just a lack of teachers understanding her position. So what they would benefit from doing is realizing her position, speaking to her about the behavior, helping Jody realize her own position, understanding that the behavior is not okay, finding alternatives to the behavior, establishing a cooperative contract to find alternate behaviors, and then doing a follow-up to guarantee that Jody is able to independently enact these procedures when she is feeling kind of vulnerable to those positions. And that is my presentation. To follow will be, of course, a works cited, and those 2 images that demonstrate the value of cooperative learning for our most disadvantaged students. Thank you so much for your time.